Please.
Thank you very much indeed, Jacques, and thank you, Claudie, for what I felt was an extraordinarily useful presentation to set the tone for our discussions this afternoon. When I first took up the task many years ago now of chairing the Irish government science promotion initiatives, the first speech I gave was on the subject of Ireland's need for a culture scientifique. We know, of course, I think it's fair to acknowledge that our colleagues in France lead the way in this and have understood for a great many years the importance of combining science and culture. But I think Claudie raises this issue at a time when it is enormously important that we, all of us within the Union, embrace this concept, because the importance of integrating science and innovation into the entire culture of our Union is fundamental to its growth and to its advancement. So I think it's a good subject, it's a good base upon which we can have a conversation today. Jack mentioned the contrast between the Anglo-Saxon way of communicating science and the continental way. Well, now, as an Irishman, I'm a Celt. I'm not an Anglo-Saxon. But I would like to talk a little bit about what the British have brought to the table, as it were, because I am conscious that there will be some people in this audience who are a little surprised to see me. They will have been expecting Brian Cox, who many of you will know has been an extraordinarily successful broadcaster in recent years on British television and has been very prominent on Irish television as well. You're not the only one surprised. I was a little bit surprised myself, because I came to the conclusion that DG Research, obviously they didn't know what I looked like, or they didn't know what Brian Cox looked like. Because those of you who have seen Brian Cox's programs will know that I do not look like Brian Cox. Women tell me, and I'm told, I take it on good authority, that he is stunning. He's gorgeous. And I'm afraid women don't say that very often about me. Not when they're sober, anyway. But Brian's success, and that's why I'd like to touch on this whole question of how do the Anglo-Saxons deal with this issue? And Brian's success is really very striking. For many, many years, my background, as Jack said, is in broadcasting. And I'm used to being stopped in the street in Dublin by strangers coming up to me and saying how much they enjoyed a particular program that I had made. But I have to tell you that in the last several years, I'm being stopped in the street in Dublin by total strangers who want to tell me how much they enjoyed Brian Cox's latest program. And I have to ask myself, what does Brian Cox have that I don't? So this is a rather painful analysis in some respects. But to be fair, Brian has something, I think, that really does inform our discussion today. And the word I would pick is authenticity. You could say enthusiasm, or you could say that he's sincere. But I'm not sure that that's really the word I want. I remember an editor of mine once telling me that sincerity was the key to great broadcasting. That, if people understood you to be sincere, they would listen to you. If people understood you were sincere, they would want to know the things that you were telling them. And he said, sincerity, that's the key. If you could fake that, you've got it made. Now, I accept that it's actually not that difficult, not that easy to fake sincerity, but it can be done. But that's really, in a way, why I've chosen the word authenticity. and why I think that in the simple act of communicating directly with an audience, I think Brian Cox's authenticity is what really is the key. He is himself. And I would say to young communicators, as I arrived here today, I hadn't met any of our presenters, but I recognized them immediately when I came into the room, because it's been my great honor over many years to have been dealing with young researchers such as they and watching them communicate with audiences what they do. It's a wonderful skill, and it's one, of course, that we must and should ingrain in our education systems. It should be an integral part of every program in every science and technology university in Europe. But I do also want to say to people that may feel, well, you know, I don't feel that I can do it, that there are a number of things, a number of pointers that I would give. The first is be authentic. Be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't try to be Brian Cox. Be yourself. I would also say be nervous. Be a little bit nervous. I'm not saying that being nervous is good. What I'm saying is that you really can't perform unless you have a bit of it. So it really worries me when somebody says, I'm not a bit nervous. I don't want to hear from people who aren't nervous, because that suggests to me that they don't care. And so when you feel nervous standing up in front of a group of people, that should be an empowerment, not a reason to avoid it. I absolutely acknowledge that there can be occasions when this becomes a block to your performance. I absolutely acknowledge that that happens. And it may be, in certain cases, it's just not for you. I don't suggest that you should plough your way through debilitating nervousness when you're speaking in public, because I have met a great many great scientists who are not great communicators. And I've met a great many communicators, great communicators, who weren't particularly good scientists. So good science and good communication don't always go together, and it may be that it's somebody else in your lab who's the person that's more likely to succeed with the communication tasks. But I really would ask everybody to try and get past that nervousness, because that does fuel a good performance when it's in proper measure. And it's even, if you are determined to do this and nervousness is the only barrier, talk to your GP. There are tricks which every concert musician knows that work, but I would only recommend that you talk to your GP about those sort of things. I'm not about to expound my own theories here. And I think finally on this subject of how to be a good individual communicator, I think the final thing I would say is know your audience. Tailor what you're saying for your audience, because of course what you say to colleagues or even to an educated audience isn't what you will say to a general audience. And very particularly, and this is really an area that I feel very passionately about because they are the future, when you're communicating with young people, please talk at their level. That doesn't mean reach down to their level. That is not the phrase I am using. I am not even saying reach up to their level, which I think would in some ways be a more appropriate way of putting it. I'm saying be at their level, and in particular encourage engagement. And invite questions. Invite the thing that children do best is ask questions. That's what makes every child a great scientist. I have never in my life, and I teach class regularly in small schools around Ireland, partly because it educates me. They teach me things I would learn from nobody else. And I learn from them through their questions because, as I say, nobody is born not a scientist. Every child is a scientist. Every child asks questions. It should be encouraged. And when we speak to them, it is really important that we engage with them at that level. Finally, just a couple of very brief comments again about the whole culture scientific thing. It's an area that I won't go into in detail here. I'm happy to talk to people if they're interested afterwards. But I am particularly concerned as we look to the future in Europe. At developments in the United States particularly, but I'm already seeing them in certain parts of Europe, and I include, sadly, my own country in this, but not some of the larger countries yet. But there has been, particularly in the English-speaking media, a collapse of the business model. You are looking at, before you now, an endangered species in some parts of the world. I'll give you a very specific example just to say why I'm alarmed. My area of specialization is space science and technology. All but one of the senior colleagues in the United States has lost his job in the last 3 years. Because the business model has collapsed. It is hard to credit, but the Houston Chronicle fired its space correspondent because it couldn't afford to pay him. And he wasn't being paid very much. Aviation Week and Space Technology, one of the eminent journals, as a cost-cutting measure, closed their Cape Canaveral bureau and laid off probably the finest aerospace journalist of my generation. So there is something very dangerous happening. And what we're losing in all of this is we're losing independent oversight. I can't claim that every time we as space journalists have reported events in the space business that we have been as rigorous as maybe we should have been in alarming people to developments. But the independence of thought that journalists bring to a subject like science is critical. And I'm already seeing it in Ireland, where a number of my colleagues have given up because there just isn't the money there to pay them to do journalism, science journalism. And what happens is that the task falls to the scientists and to the professional communicators in state agencies and so on, who do an excellent job, but have a very particular agenda. And at this stage, I believe that there are some canaries dying in the coal mine. I am not at the moment saying that, that we are on the brink of a disaster, but I do warn you that as economic conditions deteriorate, the trend towards editors taking press releases from universities or from research institutions or from governments is one which I think we need to be wary of, because we need independent journalism. We need young men and women who are prepared to ask difficult questions and who are prepared to spend the time and effort to explain science to the European citizen. It's a pressing problem. I think it's still addressable, but I think time is running out. So I just raise that as one issue that concerns me particularly, and I look forward greatly to the conversation. And again, I thank Claudie for raising this whole question of the culture scientifique, which I think has to be at the very heart of anything we can discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. I'll say just two things, very sincerely. One, I am absolutely certain we made the right choice in inviting you. And second, you are irresistible. Okay, now the two masters have taken the floor, they set the pitch, and of course they've consumed a little bit more time than I would have liked. Let's move to the pupils. So I will be pretty strict on timekeeping. Francesca, please go. So the rules game, each pupil now will go to the lectern, present herself or himself, depending, very quickly, and then there will be comments by the masters. Please, Francesca.